Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Mars, the red planet. For hundreds of years, scientists, as well as a fair few novelists and filmmakers, have speculated that it might be home to civilisations that are either long dead or have evolved to be far in advance of our own. Following the confirmation of the past existence of surface water, we have landed rovers on Mars to search for evidence that it supported life. Join us on Aliens Explored as we ask the question, is there life on Mars?
Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Aliens Explored, where we look into the strange and mysterious in amongst the UFO community and other otherworldly events. I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
And this week we are asking the question, famously put by David Bowie, is there life on Mars? We're not talking about the time-travelling cop TV show, British TV show, though, Neil.
Yes, we're not talking about that either. Not the Bowie song, not the Bowie song, and not the...
No, today we are talking about the planet, the red planet in our solar system, our nearest neighbour, and the most likely, scientists say, to have at least had what we would term terrestrial life. It's the closest to Earth-like environments. But I've got to say, one of the things I really struggle with when scientists come out with this sort of thing is they're looking at how life has formed on this planet as a basis. Well, for a start, on this planet alone, we get such an abundance of life in all types of conditions. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that life could form wherever it happens to form. It would just be different to terrestrial life.
Yeah, I mean, I remember thinking that a long, long time ago. People saying, "Oh no, nothing could possibly live on Mars." Well, no, just because we couldn't live on Mars, or nothing that's grown up on planet Earth could live on Mars. In fact, most of the life on planet Earth can only survive on its own particular little bit of planet Earth. Can't it? There aren't that many species that are found all over the planet.
Well, I mean, it's true, human life couldn't have developed on Mars. I think that's a reasonable explanation. Dogs couldn't have developed on Mars, but it's not to say that something completely different. What about silicon-based life forms?
But hasn't the search mainly been for evidence of life on Mars a long, long time ago, when Mars might have been a bit more like our planet?
Well, the public scientific searches that have gone on, yes, look at whether or not Mars could have been life-sustaining at some point. Now, I'm using the word public scientific searches there because I'm not entirely convinced that they would reveal everything to us. I think there'll be things that are being explored that they're not sharing. I think there'll be things they've found that they're not sharing. I think there'll be things that have been found, been pointed out by the public, and then they've come up with excuses for. So just because they say it's, oh no, that's such and such a thing, I don't necessarily believe that in all cases. But we'll see. We'll see. I've actually formed a list. I don't know how you've prepared for this discussion, Neil, but I've prepared a list of, I won't say evidence, but things to look into about Mars that I think bear some scrutiny. What about yourself? What's your general thoughts on this topic before we delve into it?
Well, it's something that's been speculated about for a very, very long time. When I was, in my lifetime, a man first orbited the planet in a spacecraft and survived the experience. So, growing up in the 1960s, we saw, going from orbiting our planet to finally making a trip to the moon and then landing on the moon, and we all assumed it was just going to carry on from there, and soon we'll be in the world of Fireball XL5 or whatever space opera. Well, Star Trek was probably a way off, but we thought we would be in this world. And of course, most of the horror films of the 50s and into the 60s were sci-fi based. So instead of having vampires and werewolves, they had aliens, and very often those aliens were Martians. So it was kind of the neighbouring planet. I don't think at the time, I don't remember that when I was only a junior school kid, I don't remember much talk about how much it costs to put someone up in space. And I don't remember much talk about, how getting to Mars is a completely different proposition to getting to the moon. I mean, we all had our maps of the solar system, but it didn't really give you an idea of the scale that, to get to you can get to the moon in a few days, but it'll take you years to get to Mars.
Yes.
We didn't quite appreciate how far away, how much further it was. That really you had to be able to get to the moon in order to be able to launch your Mars mission from the moon. Effectively, that's what they were talking about. So,
well, it's easier to do that because of the lower gravity on the moon. You can generate far more thrust from there.
You would be able to assemble a much larger craft that wouldn't have to achieve escape velocity from the atmosphere. So Mars has fascinated us for a long time. It's the only planet in our solar system that people thought might support life, and Mercury and Venus are probably too hot, and doesn't it rain sulfuric acid on Venus or something like that? It's completely toxic atmosphere
to us.
That
comes back to my original point. Just because it's toxic to life on our planet doesn't mean to say that life couldn't evolve there.
Yeah. Whereas Mars is kind of seen as a dead planet, with the suggestion it might once have been alive. So there have been, over the centuries, there have been these the Martian canals, which were spotted. Was it the 19th century or the 18th century? Mm-hmm. The discovery of polar ice caps. That they discovered there's signs that there has been water on.
Oh yes.
Well, I suppose the canals are evident. Well, if they were canals, which I think that's been pretty much exploded now, hasn't it? They're more an optical illusion than a thing. But that suggests water and a civilization that can make use of it for transport.
Well, there's certainly plenty of evidence that there was at some point liquid water, because that's an important aspect to it. Not just water, but the fact it's liquid water on Mars. Oh yeah, there's plenty of evidence for that, and it's also worth considering when we talk about life. What do we actually mean? Because it's been proven that life exists on Mars, or at least has existed. So 3% of the meteorites that hit the planet Earth came from Mars. In some of those, they have found microbiotic fossils.
So they come from Mars, the meteorites?
3%.
So it's just bits of Mars breaking off and
I guess, yeah.
Tumbling towards Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
That's out there. But yeah, so in some of these, like I say, you get fossilised microorganisms. So yes, it's a statement of fact that Mars once had life. Whether it still has life is another question. And really, I think it's fair to say that's not really what we're talking about here. What we are talking about is sentient life. does Mars have sentient life on it, or
right? Because
or has it had at some point?
Most of the Mars explorers, where they've speculated about signs of life, it always seemed to focus on microscopic life. And
well, yes, the fact it used to hold microscopic organisms, does it still? Are there living examples of them rather than just fossilized examples? It's an important question because without microscopic life, you can't have any other form of life. It's been theorized.
Yes.
So that would be a good, if they find microscopic life there that exists. I mean, what can we learn about that life? There's all sorts of scientific endeavours, and it would be pretty big news. But we're talking in this about actual sentient beings, conscious beings that perhaps make and use tools and equipment. There's been there's been quite a lot out there, especially as the photos have been coming from Mars from the various rovers. I've got to say, I've looked through a lot of these, and some of it is nonsense. There's shadows that people say, oh look, that's a statue of a woman. No, it really isn't. That famously, you've got the face on Mars. Now, I was never convinced by the face on Mars in the first place, I'll be honest. For a start, it's a bit too generic, and who builds a statue facing upwards? It just doesn't happen. So,
unless it's a statue of an astronomer.
Well, even then,
looking at the sky.
Even then. And indeed, they've now shown much closer images, much more high resolution images of that particular mound, and very clearly it's not. It's not a face. But I think there are enough things that raise genuine questions. Now, from all this, I'm going to say from the outset, I have my own personal theory on this, which is that yes, there either has been or is a technologically advanced species existing on Mars. Whether they come from there originally is another topic for discussion. But I believe that there is a sentient race living on Mars, or has lived on Mars, and that we see evidence of it. Well, I say on, because my personal theory is they actually live underground. Now, when we think about the theories that we've explored on this very show about alien bases underwater, underground, why couldn't Mars be used for such a thing as well? And indeed, in the South Pole of Mars, you have a very deep, wide pit, not dissimilar to what you have in this planet that's been theorised as an entrance to part of the hollow Earth theory that we discussed some time ago, Neil. Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
And we talked about this entrance, this cavernous entrance. Well, there is a deep pit in the South Pole of Mars that is not dissimilar. So I think that's a thing of itself. But you've got... So if I go through my list of bits and pieces...
Okay.
So there's been a photograph of a number of different items and rocks that look quite interesting. One of which looks like a thigh bone.
A what?
A thigh bone, a bone from a thigh, from it almost a human-looking, or certainly humanoid-looking thigh bone. And when you look at this photo, it really does look like it could be a thigh bone. It's been said, it's been sort of passed off as, oh no, it's just a rock that looks like one. I look at that photo, I'm not convinced at all that it's not. And indeed, if you have had humanoid sentient life wandering the planet, at some point you're going to find remnants like that on the surface. just like there is a skull. It's been called the Sasquatch skull because people seem to think it looks like what the skull of a Sasquatch would look like. Again, I mean, that one I can consider, could equally be a rock, but if you're going to have humanoid life there, then the idea that it does look, that you do get remains on the planet at some places, I think is perfectly reasonable. I'm starting with a sort of lower end here, so feel free to interject on this.
Are we talking about life that came to be on Mars, and which has developed and advanced in a way, well, as you say, probably not similar to our own, but on those grounds, we've started with primitive life forms which have evolved into more complex life forms which have evolved into civilizations? Or are we talking about extraterrestrials from somewhere else who have decided that planet Earth is of interest because it's habitable and inhabited, but I know, let's have a little base camp. We can hide under their seas, we can hide underground in their in the remote parts of that planet, but we could also have a bigger base on a nearby, well, to them Mars would be a nearby planet, wouldn't it? It takes us a couple of years, but if you're capable of interstellar travel, then yeah, you could. It's minutes, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, that is a brilliant question, and I have no answer for it at all. But I recognise the possibility of either. I would suggest that, in terms of likelihood, the latter is probably more likely. That if these otherworldly beings are coming and forming bases here on Earth, why wouldn't they form a base on Mars as well? And indeed, if they're forming underground bases, they'd also, if they're monitoring us the way it's speculated they are, they'd also know our capabilities in terms of what we can see on other planets. So making an underground base at Mars makes perfect sense. But you might also get some debris. You get UFO crashes on this planet. If you've got a base on Mars, doesn't it stand to reason that you're going to get UFO crashes on Mars as well?
I don't know. I'm likening that to an Air Force bomber mission. That how often the bombers set off from their base and they get shot down, or they have to engage in tactical manoeuvrings which are dangerous and end up often with them crashing while they're over hostile territory. So that they often crash. They might often crash when they're visiting Earth because of all the evasive manoeuvres they have to take, or what have you. But they don't often crash when they get back to their own base. Although they could every now and then.
That's
happen.
A reasonable thing a reasonable analogy there, very much so. But as you say, even if it's less likely, it's still a possibility, which would result in debris and possibly remains on the surface.
Well, also what would result in debris? I mean, Mars has lost its magnetic field, hasn't it?
I don't know.
So its surface environment has been affected through atmospheric loss and increased radiation. It's significantly degraded surface habitability. I mean, although Mars doesn't have continental drift or tectonic plates, so one reason they can explore it is that not much has changed in millions of years on the surface, apart from what can be changed by wind. But part of the liquid water theory was to do with meteorite impacts, and it says here that observations on Earth and numerical modelling have shown that a crater forming impact can result in the creation of a long-lasting hydrothermal system, i.e. it creates a warm patch, and for a surprisingly long time. That when ice is present in the crust, it could turn it to liquid water, and as an example of how long it could last, a crater that was 130 kilometres. Presumably that's in diameter rather than, I don't know, it doesn't say. It says 130 kilometre large crater, so I don't know if that's radius or diameter or circumference. But it said it could sustain an active hydrothermal system for up to 2 million years.
Wow.
Which is long enough for life forms to develop, for microscopic life to emerge, but not long enough for anything more. It would emerge and then the spot would cool down and it would die off again. So I don't know, that could create life forms, but not lead to anything long lasting.
No, unless there was external intervention.
Unless there was external intervention, yes.
That's a possibility as well. So if we look at some of the other things that's been seen, so the Opportunity rover at one point took a snapshot of a particular area, came back again at a later time, and an object has appeared in it. It's been referred to as the jelly donut because it looks like I suppose vaguely. I mean, I looked at it. I didn't see a jelly donut at all, but
for our English listeners, that will be a jam donut, which looks a lot like a small rock.
Yes, but the point is, it's appeared. Now they've said, "Oh, that's because the rover disturbed stuff," but then we'd see if that was happening, we'd see a lot more of this, and we don't. And surely part of the design of it is that it doesn't disturb stuff, but.
Well, Mars doesn't.
It's been speculated it might be some type of fungus.
Okay.
But no, there's been.
Couldn't the rover pick it up and bring it back so we can have a closer look at it?
I don't know. It's just been dismissed as that was just some debris that's been disturbed. There's been some really interesting. There's quite a lot of what are sort of shiny metal fragments been spotted by the rovers, and even some plastic type things found. Each time it's claimed, oh no, it's just natural ore. Well, natural ore doesn't tend to be that shiny, for one thing. In the case of the plastic type, or they're saying it's plastic, it was clearly, when it was first spotted in a photograph, it was very clearly an artificial object was seen. And NASA are claiming a bit fell off the rover, and that's what it is. Now, these rovers are built to be pretty sturdy. Bits shouldn't be falling off them, and if they were, why are they still working? You're sending this rover up to another planet. You're not going to put anything on there unless it's absolutely essential. So what is it that's falling off? And why was it on there in the first place when they could have reduced the payload? So
I don't know. I mean, it could be they say, well, we want to take this highly sensitive device up there because it would be useful, but yeah, there's a danger that it's not very robust. And oh shit, we lost it. Oh well, never mind.
But they didn't report that anything wasn't working.
We have sent craft to Mars that have crashed, haven't we?
Oh yes, a number, yes. But they were claiming that this was from the rover because it was nowhere near the crash sites of any of the others. So that's quite a strange one. There's the piles of boulders. So there's a number of piles of boulders in one area that look like they've been stacked. I think that's a real strange, almost like cairns. stacked boulders.
Are these real pictures? Because I'm looking at it, I'm not finding all these. I'm looking at things like UV radiation and cumulative effects and cosmic radiation and all the effects of that, recurrent slope lineae, nitrogen fixation, but nothing about these oddities like stacks of rocks and donuts.
Put it Mars
silica.
Mars boulder piles. Try searching that. Like I say, various photos of fragments of shiny things. There's a lot of photographs of spherical objects. There's one that people have said looks like a cannonball, which I can accept it's not. One that a lot of people refer to as blackberries, which is like small spherical pieces of NASA are saying hematite. But they're almost perfectly spherical. And in fact, there's at an outcrop that's been named Kirkwood, there's a large collection of spherical objects that they just don't know what it consists of or why it's there. But spheres are... Am I right in thinking they're not that common in nature?
They are. They're very common. A raindrop is a perfect sphere.
Well, it is while it's falling, but once it hits the ground, it's not.
Yeah, so liquid falling or something... but for instance, that's how they make ball bearings. They're drop forged. They drop them down they drop them from a great height while they're in a molten state, and when they hit the bottom, they're by the time they hit the bottom, they're solid. So,
okay.
Although I don't know what you'd have travelling through space in a molten state that would suddenly form a sphere, and then that sphere would survive impact with a planet.
Well, okay, but I can accept then that spheres are a natural thing. So fair enough.
But as you say, spheres lying around on the ground aren't a natural thing. Spheres forming in the air are.
Yes. But, okay. But for me, one of the biggest, most telling, to me this is a complete smoking gun. There was a photograph taken by one of the rovers of a bright light in the distance. Now, NASA have claimed this was caused by cosmic rays. And instantly that puts me in mind of, the Men in Black movies when they're like, oh yeah, well, light was bouncing off of Venus and it came in over a swamp and caused utter bullshit, Cosmic rays.
But
please.
Is there such a thing as cosmic rays? I mean...
cosmic rays are a real thing. But that it's causing a light to appear, like it's shining, like it looks like an artificial light in the distance.
Well, I'm looking at your green screen behind you, which is depicting the aurora borealis, which is a naturally occurring light. Could it have been something like that? What causes the aurora borealis apart from?
This is not so. The aurora borealis is a soft light. This is a bright. It looks like a flashlight in the distance, which the aurora borealis, of course, does not. It's on a very fixed, small point in the distance.
Would sunlight reflecting off a mirror have that effect?
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Yes, it would. Absolutely. But you've got to have a mirror to do that. A mirror being an artificial object.
Could ice do that?
Yes, but this was nowhere near either of the poles. There isn't. Is there ice on Mars?
There's ice, yeah. Although I think it's subsurface. I mean, they discovered the north, and it's got a north. Mars is very similar to Earth in many ways. That it's a day is about the same length as an Earth day. It has the same tilt on its axis, so it's got seasons, and it does have. I an underground Arctic, or there is ice at its polar ends.
But this wasn't at the poles. That's
Right.
and it was above ground.
Mm.
It's just in the distance, a bright light.
Yeah.
It's a
Interesting.
strange one. It is a strange one.
And it wasn't a fault on the camera causing something.
Well, you'd think that if that were the case, that's what they would say was the cause of it.
Mm.
It's not. I've never seen a fault like it. But there we go. And I'm going to mention one last thing that I find is quite interesting. This was spotted by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. There are some coils, some spiral marks that look very much like petroglyphs in one area. Now, it's claimed from the University of Arizona that when you get two lava flows in opposite directions, they create this spiral effect. I don't think I've ever seen anything. These are almost perfect spirals, and it's a bit hard to attribute that. I mean, some of it's on the side of a mound, so lava would be flowing downhill. It wouldn't be. It would have to defy gravity. I know there's not much gravity on Mars, but it would have to defy what there is in order to achieve this. And the thing it puts me really in mind of course, is crop circles. So that's a bit of an interesting one.
So, I mean, I know there's volcanic activity on Mars. Does it actually?
Yes.
Have they ever actually had erupting volcanoes? One that would be spewing material into the atmosphere?
Well, they must have had at some point for it to be volcanic.
Because if it was spewing molten rock high up into the sky, which would then fall to Earth, that would form a sphere as it came down.
Okay.
And lava is quite. I mean, it's like a pumice stone, isn't it? It's quite lightweight, porous.
It is. It is. Yeah. I can see that. So I mean, yes, you've turned me around on the spherical object thing. But I think there's so many other things that defy rational explanation. But what do you think? Is there? And let's stick with a sentient life on or under Mars, then, Neil.
Well, I'm kind of going with all the science fiction I've ever seen where it depicts life on Mars. It all assumes that life developed there before it developed here because the planet's further out. Maybe in the days, was the sun hotter before? Was there a time when Mars was more conducive to supporting life, and then as their planet died and we started developing, then? But in any case, they're advanced. So if we're talking sentient life, we're not talking about life that hasn't reached, or maybe it has. Maybe they got stuck at the Neanderthal stage or the underground troglodyte stage. But I mean, when they're talking about this life, they're talking about stuff that's millions of years old, or the evidence of things. Yeah, the fact that, I mean, human beings aren't even in the fossil record, are they? Because we haven't been around long enough.
No.
So we're talking petroglyphs. We're talking really, really old. I don't know. Actual sentient life, actually, life forms that are perhaps as advanced or more advanced than ours. If there is, they're keeping it hidden because we're here in plain sight. If they wanted to see life on Earth, they could easily do that. Or evidence of life, they could get that with a telescope. But we can't seem to find evidence of their life apart from suggestion that microorganisms have at some point existed on the planet, and other things that look like they might be remnants of a civilization. So I don't know whether we're talking about life that has developed on the planet, or whether, if you accept that there are that extraterrestrials have visited us here on Earth, then it's not beyond the bounds of possibility. In fact, it's probably quite likely they'd have made a stop off on Mars.
I think that's fair enough.
You know, if you're travelling, I'm just thinking of getting into Star Trek mode now, but if you're travelling on an enormous intergalactic ship, that's not what you're going to put in the orbit of the inhabited planet you want to discreetly visit. You would have smaller craft that you would dispatch from the larger craft, from the mother ship. I'm thinking, of course, in human sci-fi terms.
That's where this falls down.
So what do you do with the big ship? You either land it somewhere on an uninhabited planet that won't destroy it, or you keep it in orbit or floating around somewhere while these smaller craft make their visit. So, I think if you accept that extraterrestrials have been here, then they've probably been there too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're probably on the same page for the most part with this. That I think if there is life existing currently on Mars, then yes, I think it's underground. I think perhaps it didn't originate there. I do think there is the possibility that there is a sentient species that either died out there or moved away, though. But you're talking sort of millions, possibly billions of years beforehand. Let's not forget we heard that report from the Stargate project when we looked into the Black Vault files. There was that one, the remote viewing 1 million years ago, that saw tall humanoid beings on Mars. So I don't want to rule out the possibility of native sentient life on Mars completely. But I think now, yes, more likely it's some otherworldly being that's just using it as a base. But what do you think, listeners? Are the chances of anything coming from Mars 1,000,000 to 1? Or has it already happened? Some people do theorise, in fact, that we come from Mars and we were transplanted here after some calamitous event. Is that what you subscribe to? Or is it something completely different? Do let us know by the usual means, Facebook and Twitter. And you can find us, of course, at aliensexplored.com. And if you've enjoyed listening to this, do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Pandora. I actually don't know how you leave reviews on Spotify, so there we go. But wherever you listen to your podcast, do leave us a review. It helps other people to find this and to join in on the debate. But don't forget to join us next time, when we'll be going back in time 4,000 years to Mohenjo-Daro, an Indian city that had an atomic bomb, it seems, Neil.
Mohenjo-Daro. Well,
Mohenjo-Daro, yeah.
I'll look into it and let you know.
I'm sure you will. So don't forget to join us for that one. In the meantime, keep watching the red planets, the blue planets, and all the planets in the skies. Take care for now.
Bye-bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.